go up. But I try to tell people, I'm sure most of your listeners like Bitcoin because you
Right.
talk
Mhm.
about it. But
Mhm.
my goal is to get people like my mom who are kind of
Mhm.
agnostic to Bitcoin. They don't understand it, but the getting her to over that hump of like, it sounds really dumb, right? Internet money,
Right. Yeah, oh,
everything,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, everything on the internet she's
yeah.
seen that can be replicated, can be hacked, can be all these
Mhm.
things. So um that that's kind of my mission with Bitcoin is you don't have to like it actually. You can look at it and be like, that's still stupid.
Mhm.
But at least most people who say that don't even understand what it does in the value proposition and the freedom. That's why I focus on freedom technology because most people would love a currency or to
Mhm.
trade outside of government control. And
Mhm.
Bitcoin's kind of agnostic to how you think about it too, which is another great thing. It just is what it
Mhm.
is. So either you
Gotcha.
like it or you don't. You don't have to like it, but it's not going
Right.
to change, which is
Mhm.
um, valuable to me. I
Right.
think economics. This is why another reason. If you see like the distorted supply chain, and
Mhm.
you see, so imagine like people who aren't in business don't or don't run a business or like, oh, what's going on? But so imagine writing a contract with somebody. And a lot of these businesses write shipping contracts, write
Mhm.
futures contracts based off of currency, or based off the dollar,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So if that thing that they're using is constantly changing in value, how hard does that make business? It makes it nearly
Yeah.
impossible. So
Mhm.
inflation is causing all these distortions in contracts, and then all of a sudden you signed a contract a year ago and inflation went up, the dollar went down 10% in value. So you're like, I can't make a profit. So you go out of business because you wrote this contract a year ago. It just makes it very hard to
Mhm.
grease the skids of the economy. And it's all because of
Mhm.
politicians. But
Mhm.
again, we vote for it because we don't know the option. When they say we're going to cut Social Security, they're like, that sounds bad. I'm like, okay, what's the other option? It's like, well, we keep it around and we
Mhm.
devalue every single bit of purchasing power everyone has in the economy. Oh, okay.
Okay.
You didn't tell me that part.
Right.
Right.
Right. Okay. And then, well, yeah, and also regarding Bitcoin, I think, I keep going back to the baby boomers, but I mean, they went through, just writing simple checks, paper checks, you very rarely see that anymore, to the credit cards, to the debit cards. So they've had, learning curves through there. And I think what will help, that generation and, well, even current generations to give more security to come into the crypto market, so to speak. And I hate to say it because all the purists were saying, well, it's, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, we don't need government regulation and stuff. But in order to pull those hedge funds in, mutual funds, what am I thinking? The retirement funds, public and
Pensions.
private, yeah, pensions, yeah, they're gonna need regulation, and that might
Sure.
be a kind of a two-edged sword, but I think more positive than negative, having more regulation on it, to give people more comfort. But it's still, your responsibility. And at the same time,
Yeah.
you never Bitcoin as opposed to any other company, product, service, but anyway, anything you can think of, it never has gone down. In other words, lost its ability to keep producing those blocks approximately every 10 minutes. Number two, technically, it's never been hacked. Now, have private users been scammed? Yes, have private users, because they didn't handle their business correctly and pull it off the exchange. So they have to take a little bit of credit, for that,
Yeah.
loss there. But yeah, I mean, it's up to this point, it's been pretty much bulletproof, in those regards. So yeah.
Yeah. I think, blockchain technology, um, distributed ledger specifically of Bitcoin is probably one of the biggest inventions of our lifetime that because it's even hard for people to wrap their head around. It's like, okay, go ahead and talk to the CEO and shut it down. It's like, okay, talk to the CEO over the internet then. It's kind of
Right.
the same thing. It's like, who is
Right.
it?
Exactly.
and uh, and by the time it becomes ubiquitous,
Mhm.
because it would have been easier to shut down at the bit in its infancy, but by the time it
Mhm.
becomes distributed, it's very hard because it's like playing whack-a-mole.
Right, and the
But
only way yeah, and the
yeah,
only way like you said, the only way you're gonna shut it down is to shut down the internet, and that's not gonna happen. And
yeah.
even during, the internet boom, back in the '90s, there was multi-generational wealth being made there, and a lot of people didn't realize it. And I think that's gonna be, the same scenario, with Bitcoin cryptocurrency over the next 2, 3 years as we come into and past the halving. And what I'm getting at is that even during the dot-com boom, et cetera, when computers and all that technology and the internet was coming on board, there were major people, uh, companies, newspapers especially, that were poo-pooing it, saying it'll never work. It's another scam, da 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 da. And it's kind of funny how you see this next technology over the years, president of, JP Morgan coming out and saying bad things about it, so on and so forth. But if you look up JP Morgan, I don't know how many patents they have on blockchain. You know what I'm saying? So they're saying one thing, and behind the closed
I
doors,
mean, if
yeah,
you understand, how the banking system works, you know why
mhm,
Jamie Dimon
yeah,
they are able to print money. They loan money into existence. So
yeah,
why would they like Bitcoin? Because they can't create it. So,
gotcha.
of course, they would
Mhm,
hate it.
mhm,
And you can be a skeptic. One of the things I like to remind people of is in a vacuum, you kind of look at Bitcoin and be like, okay, so what? I have Venmo, I have this other thing. But that's why I always lead with the problem we're in, okay, with fiat currency. And some people are experiencing the symptoms of it with inflation and so on, and government control and all that. But you have to understand the problem before you understand what Bitcoin actually solves, because Bitcoin doesn't solve a problem until you see what the problem is, right? So, and we're starting, unfortunately, to see the problems with fiat, and that government can control a printer, and government can use that printer for power and leverage, and human beings are sinful, and who knows what I would do in that seat. I hope I wouldn't be uh, corrupt, but who knows, right? And it can corrupt people because it's this like fix. It's the easy. I tell people it's like the make the. You remember those easy button commercials? I think it was like
oh
Staples.
yeah, right, right,
So,
yeah,
so it was it's that button, but it's make the pain go away. So anytime we
mhm,
have a economic downturn, the money printer can make the pain go away. So you just
mhm,
hit that button and the pain goes away.
mhm,
Like the last 2 years, we kinda saw that, so does it make the pain go away? This is kind of rhetorical. Does it make the pain go away, or does it delay it and make it bigger? I think you can guess how I feel about it.
right,
It makes it bigger. So,
mhm,
it doesn't make the problem really go away. So, that button is broken now because we
mhm,
have inflation. So with the easy button of okay, families are experiencing inflation, and everything's becoming more expensive, and the last thing that goes up during inflation is your wages. We just can't hit the easy button anymore,
mhm.
because we now have so much debt in the system.
Right. Yeah. Speak. And then also, I wanted to ask you about this. I'm looking at in this book, recent book I got about the MMT, modern monetary theory, and that, I mean, as crazy as things get, I think this is the most crazy situation. And there's some politicians, you don't have to guess which side of the, room they sit on, but they're very much behind this theory, and I certainly hope it doesn't catch, too much traction. But, if, I don't know, that might be the last silver bullet they have to, for us to
Well,
go
I
on.
mean, we're right in the middle of modern monetary theory, which is essentially,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
so if you break it down,
Yeah.
um, I like to say, what you spend money on, as a country, what you spend tax revenue on is a political and a moral question. And you and I, Joe, can disagree on that, right?
Mhm,
You think we should help the poor. I think we should fund the
mhm,
military, whatever. We can have discussions
mhm,
about that. How much money we should spend is a math question. So
mhm,
modern monetary theory forgets that math. As Thomas Sowell says, the first rule of economics is scarcity. If you and I want to buy a piece of art, there's only one. Okay. The more of you and I there are, the higher that price is going to go. There's scarcity. But what modern monetary theory says is everyone can have that piece of art. But how? There's only one, right? So if you extrapolate that out, like it's everyone can have the top, everyone can have a 6,000 square foot house, everyone can drive a
Mm,
Tesla, everyone can do these things because we can print money. And there's different schools of thought and there's nuance in it, but essentially, it's government injecting liquidity into the system can boost the economy. Now, that is true to a certain extent. To say that, hey, if we're in a recession, if the government lowers interest rates, that that wouldn't spur it would spur economic activity. But like John Maynard Keynes would say that you need to do that from a surplus. So as taxes, let's say you take in more in taxes than you need to fund the government,
mhm.
which barely ever happens, right? Then you save that, and during a recession, then you inject it back in. Kind of like if you saved money,
Yeah.
you'd inject it. But if if you never save money, and during an economic downturn in your life, you just took out a credit card, that doesn't actually help you. It
Right.
just it just delays the problem, and that's what we do. We just take out another credit card. But if you had saved money, that would be good, right? You can inject
Mm,
that liquidity into your life because you maybe lost your job or what have you, and that would help you survive. But that's not how the government works. That's just not how it works. So anytime somebody tells you that money printing stimulates the economy, I always liken that to a credit card. Yes, a credit card stimulates your life, but it didn't make the problem go away. In fact, it made it bigger.
right.
So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, instantaneous satisfaction, and people walk into a store, if they had to deal with, and I don't know, maybe there is some positive things about dealing strictly with cash only society, is that
right.
you're only going to be able to buy, what's in your pocket, price wise. So that's, yeah, very interesting on
And there's a
so,
trade-off to that, like,
yeah.
if I can just add one thing real quick, like Bitcoin is a fixed money standard, and there's a
Mhm.
school of thought that says on a fixed money standard, you're not gonna have growth because you won't have credit, and credit is what drives the market. Like, if you wanna start a new business,
Right.
if you
That's
the loan for
right.
that business took it was a 30%, like, a lot of people wouldn't do it. Now there's trade-offs to a fixed money standard, but
Mhm.
one of the things I ask people, they think we live in a capitalist economy. Now capitalism is designed to give you a better product for cheaper, right? If I come to the market and I want to compete with a soap company, what have you, whatever, deodorant, doesn't matter. I need to give it to you a better product, better marketing for cheaper price, or just have a killer marketing, right? But why are things more expensive? Cars more expensive, homes more expensive. The things you need are more expensive. Healthcare is more expensive. Why? So again, rhetorical question, but if you answer that question, then you understand we're not capitalists. we uh, we have all these regulations, we have all this government putting their finger on the scale of the free market, and the free market is designed to give you better products for cheaper. But when you jack with uh, the money supply, it makes it very difficult. And
Mhm.
credit isn't necessarily a bad thing
Mhm.
if if I take out a loan and create more productivity from that loan, that's a great thing. But credit for consumption, tell me why I don't think that's good. Credit for consumption, this is not a good thing.
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, that's what I've never. Well, I mean, I understand it, but don't understand it. Why houses? Of course, what I'm getting at is the price of houses. They can be 20, 30 years old, and they're 5, 10, 15 times the price. I'm kind of exaggerating, than they were when they were built. And the only reason for it is just that inflation, because unless you've gone back in there, you pretty much have to remodel your house about it probably every 10, 12 years or whatever, because that styles change and everything and, colors and whatever. And you're always having to put, yeah, a realtor told me one time, you really need to put 1% of your home value back into your home as far as, maybe upgrades, remodeling, taking care of the landscaping per year. And, I don't know if that's the exact number, but I mean, I've dumped a lot of money back into that house on,
Right.
mainly landscaping and things like that, just minor repairs. But the way the housing market is now in my area, I literally, well, I probably couldn't or wouldn't want to apply for a loan for my own house. I think I'm priced out
Mhm.
of my neighborhood, to be honest with you. Or I
Well, that's
refuse,
that's it.
yeah, or
Well,
I
one of the things
refuse
I
to
ask
pay that
people.
much. Yeah,
Sure.
you know.
I so my home, I bought a home, a brand new home
Mhm,
in 2019, and, it's one of those neighborhoods where, every 3rd house is the same, and, my neighbor sold their house in 2021 for nearly double what I bought my house for 2 years earlier. Now that is not normal. Now, what I ask people, especially if they're in the market to sell or buy their home or buy a
mhm,
home, is how do you know if it's cheap or expensive? Just because it's
mhm,
more expensive than it was yesterday doesn't mean it's expensive and doesn't mean it's cheap, right? So, what do you compare it to? Normally, houses go up with the rate of inflation. So, if you
mhm,
track housing prices in the aggregate in
mhm.
certain areas like Austin or places where people
Yeah,
are moving, this can
mhm,
change because demand's up.
yeah,
But like the last 2 years, people felt like it was never going to come down to what caused that artificial demand was injecting liquidity into the market. Um, Everyone's stock portfolio was going up. Everyone could cash out refi at incredibly low interest rates. So it's just
mhm,
liquidity on top of liquidity on top of liquidity. But if you're like, how do I know when we've hit the bottom? If you look at 2007, and
yeah,
the housing market started to make a downturn at bottom in 2012
mhm,
nationwide in the aggregate, and it
mhm,
bottomed around the average prices of uh, when it goes up with inflation. So it bottomed around inflation. So if you track a chart of inflation, housing prices
mhm,
typically mimic that. Sometimes they go way above it, like
mhm,
in the last 2 years. Sometimes they go slightly below it, but they normally revert to the mean. So if you're in that world of like, is it
mhm,
expensive or is it cheap? We are way above the inflation line with
mhm,
homes, and a home is
mhm,
kind of a commodity. It's just a
mhm.
place you live. So why would
Yeah,
it? The only reason it should in a free market
mhm,
go way up in value is demand for the city you live in,
okay,
meaning people
mhm,
move there, right? The only reason it should go way down in value is because maybe jobs are leaving and yada yada yada.
mhm,
But this
yeah,
liquidity, this like low interest rate environment, that's
mhm.
all temporary and fake,
Okay,
in my opinion.
gotcha. But
Yeah,
yeah, but here in the DFW area, like I, keep talking about because I mean, yeah, well, let me skip back. I keep talking about the younger people because they're ones that are going to be inheriting all this stuff. And you want to, I don't know, maybe a big heart. I want to kind of give them a leg up, but just coming right out of high school into a trade or coming right out of college, into a different type of career. And then with any debt they bring with them, they're already behind the eight ball. And then you put on top of that, the average house, just a starter home. I mean, it's mind-boggling. The starter home, 200 plus thousand, at least in this DFW market here, and it's probably more than that. And even with a $200,000 home, you're going to have to go in there and,
right,
dad or Uncle James or somebody's going to have to be, a part-time contractor to help you remodel the thing so you can even
right,
live in it. So I don't, maybe things will rebalance, but bottom line, their salaries are not going up. Would you agree? Anywhere in the country, salaries are not going up at the rate of the homes or even cars. I mean, who
right.
cars nowadays? Most people have a car payment that I've had mortgage payments on. You know what I'm saying?
I did a video on this, like
Yeah,
people
yeah.
flexing their $1,500 car payment. And it's like,
Yeah, I remember
but
that
this
short, but yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
fake. This is all fake. That doesn't. What I mean fake is it's not sustainable. Just like
No.
your credit card debt, if you keep
Mhm,
piling it on and you keep piling on more and more payments, you can
mhm.
squeak by until you can't. and
Yeah.
then that whole
Okay.
domino effect happens, same thing right in our economy, and I
Mm.
feel bad for young people because they if they have the mindset, "If I work really hard, I'll be successful," that's a good place to start, but you have to be like, probably the hardest workers are people who do manual labor. They don't get
Okay.
paid that much, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to scale. Um, you have to bring something to the market that they actually want to buy. You know, if you're digging
Mm.
ditches all day, you're working really, really hard, but are you making a lot of money? Probably not, because you cannot scale that business. Your
Mm.
labor is directly tied to how much you get paid, and your time is
Mm.
directly tied to how much you get paid. But in this world of fake money and
Mm.
chasing clout being like status symbols,
Right.
if you start with a kind of a humble mindset and you understand, hey, we still live in a world, and we will always live in a world where if I'm patient, if I am disciplined, and I live below my means, I'm going to be way better off. And your friends who don't do that may deal with the may not be dealing with the consequences today, but I guarantee you they will be dealing with the consequences.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's a tough lesson to
Exactly.
learn. Some people
Mm.
learn it the hard way. I've had to learn it the hard way before, but
Yeah. Yeah, I
um,
think we all
yeah,
have at that level, right? And then also when you're young, that's the best time to take, more risk investing, whether in the stock market, crypto, or whatever, because you have more time, to make up for it if something doesn't go right.
100%.
And then, a lot of people don't really, and I was, and I can say that because I was right in there. I didn't really get serious about it until, late 20s, early 30s. And yeah, you lost a lot of time, in that regard to, you know, build that up. Because, yeah, you don't get retirement unless you inherit it. You don't get retirement money overnight. I mean, it takes
Sure.
an extended period of time, and dollar cost averaging, so to speak. Adding to it.
Yeah.
So, and
So
then
I
yeah,
tell people there's three levers, right?
mm,
There's investing,
yeah,
income, and expenses. And the easiest lever to pull is your expenses. Okay, so
right,
cut down
right,
like that. We live in this consumption economy.
mhm,
Um, if you're a young person, you could take more risks. And one of the things I tell them to look into, maybe not right
mhm,
now, but is
mhm,
house hacking. So
mhm,
when if I was to have roommates with my kid, and, I got 3 kids and a family and stuff. Wife's not too keen on that now. But when I was younger, I had tons of roommates. I lived for super cheap.
yeah,
And if you could buy a place, maybe a duplex or a house where you can rent out to your friends, they pay
mhm,
your mortgage, so you have
yeah,
zero rent costs, so you live for free, so that cuts down on a
mhm,
huge expense, and
mhm,
then you're also building equity and all these other things. So
mhm,
then you can take that money and invest it, what have you, and then you're that
mhm,
also boosts your income,
mhm,
and, and then
mhm,
the investing part you can learn later, but the first thing is, how do I lower my expenses? And think outside the box. Do you need a car? Like, a lot of people don't need a car, believe it or not, especially if they live in the city, so, um, yeah, all these status symbols.
mhm,
If you've ever read, I recommend reading or haven't read The Millionaire Next Door. It kind of studies people who are actual millionaires,
mhm,
$1 million net worth.
mhm,
And believe it or not, it's not people that make 250,000 plus, because those people, if they
mhm,
lost their job, typically won't be able to survive a month, because as
mhm,
their income goes up, so does their
mhm,
lifestyle creep. And it's people who, you know, average blue collar, make median income kind of thing, that are your
mhm.
average millionaire in the United States.
Gotcha. Yeah, there were 2 separate, occasions, and one of 'em, I worked with a lady back in the day whose husband owned I wanna say it was a State Farm, franchise, whatever you wanna call it, in Plano. In Plano, Texas, back then, that was you know well, pretty much a high end, that's where everybody wanted to be, so to speak. That was kind of the cool, trendy, up and coming, part of Dallas. And, I go, "Man, those people must be doing great." I was, a young kid, and she goes, "Well, actually, you'd be surprised how many calls he gets each month, people asking if they can postpone or whatever their car insurance until the next month and double up on it or whatever, which you can't do." But, yeah, who would have thought that, that they were
Yeah.
trying. like you were saying, and they had, $500,000, $1,000,000 homes way back then, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah, exactly. But,
Yeah, be the tortoise, not the hare. It's like
mhm,
basically your average person that you see out there who's driving a nice car.
yeah,
Number one, they can't afford it. Number two, it's financed or leased. So a lot of young people get into this trap. But to me, like being financially independent, same thing back to the Bitcoin conversation. It's about having a little bit of freedom in your life to be able to make decisions. If you have no money, you don't
mm,
have no freedom because I mean, sure, you have freedom to some degree, but if you hate your job, you can't quit because you have golden handcuffs on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to be a little bit more creative with your time and your
mm,
headspace, believe it or not.
right. And then, also nowadays with the internet, going back to the internet again, it allows you to be a little bit more creative and come up with other revenue streams. Because right out of college, any type of, in a career, but if I wanted, back then they didn't call it a side hustle, they called it a part-time job. If you wanted to
Yeah,
do that, then you had to, leave the house and, take time getting there, doing your little side gig in the evening or Saturdays or whatever, then coming back. And yeah, that it makes it a lot easier now if you could do something on the internet, so to speak. And
yep,
yeah, well, there's always I think you know the two mindsets, the people that have that hustle and drive versus, I'm comfortable, I'll deal with it. A lot of people, and including myself, a lot of times it's hard to get out of my comfort zone and move to the next level, so to speak. So that's why I want to keep doing things, learning things, getting out of that comfort zone. And yeah, just the challenge of it keeps you, I don't know, for me, keeps you feeling younger, as you get older
yeah,
to take on the
yeah. Using the left side of
next
your
step.
brain and like
Yeah.
you can get in a rut, especially like in the military, where you're kind of
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm doing 20 years and getting my
Yeah.
retirement, and that's
Yeah.
another reason why I started my channel is like be a little more
Mhm.
creative, use the other part of my
Mhm.
brain, and
Right.
I also like getting this stuff off my chest because
Right.
like I'm gonna
Yeah.
annoy my wife all day if I can't get it off my chest. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it is kinda cathartic, to get on here
right.
and talk about it. And then for me, I right out of college, I came from a, teaching, coaching background and, a lot of people always around, team building. I mean, it was honestly the greatest career ever, at least for me. But, talking financially, it was hard to get like I say, to the next level and be, a little bit more comfortable, provide a little bit more, for the kiddos, so on and so forth. So, that's kind of what led to the next step, the investing and stuff. And that, even that was a hard road because it took, part-time jobs, as I would lose money, I certainly couldn't take it out of the family budget each month. So I had to go and work it. And then like you were talking about that third lever, cutting back, instead of buying lunch or whatever, brown bagging it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not and drilling over the new trucks, other coaches would, drive up in going, dang, I wish I had that, but I'm gonna
yeah,
keep driving this paid off 100,000 mile, know, deal,
yeah.
and it paid off. I mean, eventually it did, and then and so on.
There's
So that's
I tell people there's different types of discipline. You can
mhm,
have it forced on you, or you could force it
yeah,
on yourself. And what you were just describing is, hey, you force it on yourself, so later you can afford that truck. The guy
mhm,
who bought it before he could afford it will get
yeah,
it forced on him when he can't make the payment, right? And which one's
right,
worse? So you have a decision to make, but you will be have forced discipline one way or another. It's ideal to force it on yourself, and like you were saying,
mhm,
if you want, let's say you want to go into sales like in your 30s or whatnot, and there's a lot of jobs out there that there's a huge upside
mhm,
to having that job, but it's maybe commission based, and
yeah,
a lot of people can't take that step because they don't have any money. So
we'll have to back
if
them
you're in
up,
the
yeah,
right,
mhm,
so
mhm,
if you're in kind of you've been saving and you're financially
mhm,
disciplined, you can take riskier steps with
mhm.
way more upside than people who are just paycheck to paycheck.
Right. But yeah, and part of that, going back to the other career, we're all social creatures, and that kind of what, brought me to, Twitter and YouTube, was just to, interaction, with like-minded people rather than
Right.
just, sitting in the office at home, clicking a mouse, pulling
Yeah.
money. And really, I didn't, and I'm probably talking to you like you're a therapist or something anyway, you know,
Right.
but
Yeah.
with teaching and coaching, that's what I love about my little Patreon deal is that I, pour my heart and soul into that. Uh,
That's
because you
awesome.
get positive feedback from the people, just like you would with your players and people in the classroom, and just pulling money out of the market to me, that's not satisfying. I mean, yeah, it helps the bank account, so on and so forth, and my granddaughters at some point in time. But yeah, and the people on Wall Street, and I'm sure maybe I need to talk to one of those guys and have a fair and balanced argument here. But I don't see the gratification other than if it's a a competition between other departments and other companies
Hmm.
who can make the most money. But there's really, to me, there's no deep human satisfaction just, clicking a mouse and making money, if that makes sense. It seems like there's
Well,
more to
I
life.
don't think they're in it for that. That's the thing. Like they're
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
Once you join a behemoth like a machine,
yeah,
like the military's a machine too. Like
yeah.
there's certain aspects of it that where you're like, there's a human side and then there's the bureaucratic machine side to it. It's like
Gotcha.
this this
Mm,
this thing, like Wall Street, is not doesn't have a personality. It has a
yeah,
mission. And it's to make money and
gotcha.
crush souls. That's to a certain degree. So,
Right.
like, you can be part of that, but that's what Wall
Yeah.
Street does. And
Okay.
that's why, yeah, I agree with you. Like coaching and
Mhm,
having an interpersonal
mhm,
relationship with somebody where
mhm,
you can see
mhm,
them grow. That's what I do in the
mhm.
military is teach. And
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I could see
yeah,
that.
it's
Yeah, I could see that from the very, and I'm not just saying that. Yeah, first time I started watching your videos, the way you broke stuff down, it was like you were right in the room, with us. So it wasn't just like a
yeah, I appreciate that.
robot or something. I mean, yeah, you could tell you were into the subject and wanted to
Yeah.
explain it. And that's a big deal. That's where a lot of teachers nowadays have issues. You got to get those personal relationships with the kids because they're not going to believe you unless they can trust you. And
Oh yeah,
same
like yeah.
the coaching, they got to buy in to your program, you know, and the old ad, lead by example, servant leadership, that's all that type of stuff. You got to know the kids because there's some of them, I never did it, but there's some kids you could, grab their, face mask and yell in their face or
Hmm.
whatever. It
Yeah.
wouldn't bother them, I mean, yeah, whatever. And then there were some you had to know, hey, just kind of whisper to them, hey, Johnny, you just step it up, and man, that would hurt them worse than yelling at them. So you have to know
Hmm.
the personalities and things. But anyway, I could talk about that all day. But yeah, and I hate to, if it one, and maybe things will change one of these days. I don't know. As far as pay, for teachers, that's the biggest
Hmm.
industry in any state is education, and in my opinion, the most important thing and I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but yeah, they need to revamp the whole thing. It's getting way too political. They need to be there. You need to leave your politics and everything else on the door when you go in, because yeah, back when anyway, when I was in it, you never heard any. Well, at least I didn't. Teacher, coach, or whatever, really preaching a quote unquote lifestyle. Without
Hmm.
really getting too explicit here. It was all just, hey, we're here, to learn math, and that's what was done in the classroom, or we're here to coach you up with football, track, whatever. And you didn't know all this mumbo jumbo.
Well, yeah,
You know,
like one of the my kind of
mm,
I would say it's one of my interests is,
mm,
actually a pretty big one is
mm.
I absolutely hated college because I
Yeah,
went to school for 2 years and I was like
yeah,
before I joined the military, and I
mm,
was like, "What is going on here?" Because I didn't feel like I was getting better at anything. I was learning
mm,
subjects I didn't always have bad professors, but I'm like, if I'm gonna spend $3,000 a credit hour or whatever it was expensive, but if I'm gonna spend this much, I'll just buy a book and read it. If I wanna learn
Mhm.
about Shakespeare when
Yeah.
I'm in a pre-med whatever, major,
Mhm.
because you have to have prereqs, right? If I wanna learn
Yeah.
about I'll buy a book, okay? So,
Right.
the school choice, especially in public school,
Mhm.
is absolutely essential, and, a lot of states are pushing legislation. I tell people,
Mhm.
look into that and try to push it in your own state because school
Mhm.
choice competition always
Oh,
because
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
what ends up happening is it's one of those systems, like, let's say you don't like the school in your local area. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. You're gonna get extorted for money. Whether you go to that school or not, you're gonna pay for it.
Right.
And what happens if you take just that's why capitalism's great is because you vote with your dollars.
Mhm.
Anytime the government gets involved, they prevent you from doing that. And so school choice is essential to stopping your kids
Mhm.
having an education that they don't glean
Mhm.
from. And it doesn't even
Mhm.
have to be the stuff you're talking about, Joe. It could just
Yeah.
be, hey, he doesn't learn well at this school. He doesn't learn well with these teachers, or she,
Mhm.
and I'm going to take him to a different school. They have a different learning process, and that's fine. But this one size fits all
Yeah, that doesn't
deal,
right, that
no,
doesn't
doesn't
work,
work.
and it all starts at the local level, the school board, go there and talk those guys up, and, exactly, I think, yeah, yeah, competition is the best thing, and, even with the teachers, I think, they ought to pay them based on, the success that they have, what am I thinking? Yeah, reward success, with the ability of your kids, how well they, know the subject. And yeah,
Right.
putting other, like right now, well, I don't, anyway, I don't want to get into that. It
Well,
just
you
seems
I
like,
mean, you cannot put
yeah,
a price on somebody that inspires
right,
youth, right? If
yeah,
you're that kind of teacher, you have a lot of
mm,
passion, but somebody who regurgitates a formula and is teaching math, you can put a price
mhm,
on that because that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
not that important because they can get other people to do that. But if a which is kind of hard to quantify, but a teacher who inspires and has people leave their classroom become change the world, you cannot put a price on that. And I
right,
think in school
mm,
choice, like charter schools and stuff,
mm,
that'll become more valuable because they realize
yeah,
what kind of person they are. But in the public school system, just like in any other government job, you're a pawn. And that's the way the
mhm,
system works. It's a behemoth, it's a machine.
yeah,
And the machine tries to protect itself and tries to
yeah.
stomp out competition. So,
Right. And what's funny, just like in corporate America, having talked to some of those guys, someone gets close to the top or at the top and they expand their army. I mean, it gets bigger and
yeah.
bigger. Like, back in the day, we'd have, a principal, assistant principal for X number of students. Now they've doubled up on the number of assistant principals. And I mean, what are you really doing? I mean, if it takes that much more leadership there to control the teachers, maybe you're having the wrong hiring practices, So,
Right.
yeah, but anyway, that's another video for another time. But yeah, I mean, but that's kind of where it all starts too. And the bilingual education, especially in Texas, I think that needs to be afforded to every single student starting in kindergarten because there's, certain, people coming over from all over the world, not just, the South and they're given a free and appropriate public education and bilingual education in order to help learn them to learn English starting in pre-K kindergarten. However, there's a kiddo low socioeconomic level over in East Dallas, wherever, and he goes through the system. Both kids, graduate and they go to for their first job, even the starting level job they're going to naturally pick the kiddo, that's bilingual over the monolingual kid.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things I think they need to do, especially in Texas. Every child ought to be, bilingual or at least offered that to the parent. Now, yeah, you can take Spanish or whatever, French, whatever, later on, but it's not as immersed in that subject, in that language as you are, starting out in elementary school, if that makes sense. Because they'll have a, one day will be this language, one day will be, another language. And it's not total immersion, but as close as you can get, which is the best way to learn it. So anyway, that's just one of my
Yeah,
pet
well,
peeves.
99 times out of 100, the parent's gonna prioritize the most, beneficial thing for their child. The
Mhm.
government doesn't give them that option a lot of times.
Right.
So, if you give parents options, they're gonna pick the
Mhm.
best option, and
Yeah.
naturally, the best kind of instruction is gonna rise to the top, and the people who are, sucking off the teat of the government and just want
Mhm.
to punch their time clock and regurgitate
Mhm.
information will
Yeah.
fail, which is good.
Right. That's exactly. And I think the success of a child, and I'll probably get kicked off of YouTube, but it's two parents that give a damn. I mean, it's
Yeah,
always that no
right.
matter what part of the, city you may coach or teach in, it's that parent, not that single parents can't do it. I'm just saying it's easier, with two parents. But anyway, the kid has more of an advantage, I think. But especially at the home, if it's drilled in, like you've been talking about, that discipline, you can make it, don't pay attention to what, the herd's doing, so to speak, as far as getting in trouble or whatever. And following that up at home, making sure they do their homework and stuff and
Mhm,
accountability. I mean, seriously, I coached a couple of kiddos that ended up having to, with another coach, having to drive them home after practice or after a game. And they, right there in the coach office, were calling their parents, and their parents didn't know the freaking name of the school they attended. They had to repeat
mm,
the name of the school, and took this one kid
yeah,
on one time, and he just won city in track and in a particular run. But anyway, the parents are there, of course, mobile home place, what a trailer home,
right,
a big party going on, everything else, and their kid just won, city, district, city, the top of the deal before going to state, and it's like, "Oh, okay." So, but,
yeah,
that kid ended up, doing very well, thank goodness, but that's the exception, that's not the rule.
yeah,
But, alright, well, listen, hey, let's back off here, be a little posse now. We can't save the world, but we can try, put our hand out and try to, through your
right,
YouTube's, channel and stuff, 'cause, hey, you never know who you're touching out there, to help and
yeah,
guide, and that's a big service. I think that's why we're here anyway, to share whatever little, knowledge, experience, that we have. And I appreciate you coming on here, and,
yeah, man.
I, look forward to doing it, again at some point, maybe even doing some, live stream stuff, I think,
That'd be cool to
uh,
have you on live streams because
yeah,
sometimes I chat stories and then we have
mhm.
comments,
Yeah, that's what
and
I'm
questions
mhm,
and yeah,
mhm. Okay. Alright,